Hey, great. I'll call this work session meeting in Spring City Council to order. It's September 12th, 2023. I'm sorry. We should formally do that. That's my bad. Yeah. So I would like to, we did come out of executive session at, I believe it was 6:06, 6:26. Okay. And so now we went into it. No action taken. Discussion with city attorney. So I guess technically we should adjourn from our regular session and go into work session. So call to order. And if you'll call the roll, please.
Present. Here. Here. Present.
Present. Thank you. Okay, we have three. I'm sorry. Oh, okay. Great. Well, everybody showed up and came to work. That's a good sign. Okay. So tonight we have three discussion items. The first of which is Public Services Fleet Management Plan presentation. And I guess I'll hand off to Roy and let you do the introductions and overhead.
Good evening, Council. This is Roy Cheney, Deputy City Administrator and Public Works Director. I have here John Chavez, who helped us with the fleet management program. Just a little bit about his experience, because I know that he's helped us with the stormwater program and how does his experience tie into fleet management. So he worked at Indiana Department of Environmental Management and Annapolis Department of Public Works, which he conducted the fleet program there with evaluations, looked at alternative fueled vehicles, did cost of benefit analysis, and developed pollution prevention fleet related policies. He managed the diesel emission reduction program. And so his whole thing was around public works and fleets. And so we found, hey, he can also help us with our fleet program. So I asked him to do so. And last spring, I heard council on the concerns about taking care of our fleets. And I totally respect that. And it's the community assets. We got to take care of those things. And for those that didn't know, I was in the Army and a helicopter mechanic, and taking care of those fleets is highly important because you only get one chance. And so we want to take care of these vehicles just like I would take care of those helicopters. And we're on that right path at this point. So I just want to introduce you to John here. He's going to do most of the presentation, and he can tell you a little bit more about himself if you need that, but we appreciate his help with this one. So thank you. Here, John, go ahead.
Thank you, Roy. Members of the council, thank you very much for having me here tonight. It's my joy to present to you this latest work product that I've provided for the city of Manitou Springs.
Mr. Chavez, before you go on, I just, for the record, if you give us your name and address, it's customary, and then go ahead.
Okay, yes. I'm John B. Chavez. I'm the owner of Chavez Consulting, Inc. My address is 13880 Gymkhana Road in Peyton, Colorado. Let me just give you a little bit of background because I understand that in the lower corner of my PowerPoint presentation, I state that the key to stormwater compliance. Roy is correct. I received a Master's of Science degree in Environmental Sciences from Tufts University back in '95. And immediately after that, I started working for the Indiana Department of Environmental Management, which, if some of you remember back in the early 90s, it was the time period of pollution prevention. Pollution prevention was a big buzzword back then, and it was an alternative to recycling. And I actually had a lot of coursework obtaining my master's degree in pollution prevention. And I also had a background in my earlier life of just being a car enthusiast. When I worked at the Indiana Department of Environmental Management, we were putting together pollution prevention metrics for a variety of different industries. And the automotive industry was one of those. And the Commissioner of the Department of Environmental Management asked me if I would be interested in helping develop pollution prevention options for various fleet and vehicle operations. And so we tackled vehicle coatings, we tackled vehicle salvage yards, and we tackled vehicle fleet operations. And for those of you who don't know, pollution prevention is different than recycling. It's a process by which you seek alternatives to pollution generating procedures and products. And so things like product substitution, process modifications, and life cycle recycling are options that you look at. So I have done a lot of things in regard to environmental regulation and control for fleets. When I was at the Department of at the City of Indianapolis, I also was fortunate to be the administrator for street operation and maintenance. And we had a fleet of about 500 vehicles. And I put together an inventory there and also implemented various different environmental programs in the fleet. That's been my forte. I'm an environmentalist by education and by heart. And I have been very successful throughout my career in bridging the gap between the misperception that environmental regulation costs money. And I've been able to demonstrate in a lot of cases that it actually saves money. If you don't generate a waste, it doesn't cause a waste in finances. Anyhow, back to the fleet management plan. Roy asked me back in May if I could help put together a fleet management plan. And I said, sure, I could. What are you looking for? And at that time, we were in the middle of the snow season and snow fights, and knowing where our vehicles or knowing where your vehicles were throughout those snow fight efforts was pretty critical to Roy. And so we started this thing off with an introduction to a program offered by Verizon Wireless. It's a fleet monitoring software program. Little device gets connected into a vehicle, and we can track things like vehicle location, vehicle speed, braking, a variety of different metrics. So that was the start. And Roy said, you know, we really need to put together a plan to kind of comprehensively manage the entire fleet. And I said, okay, do you want just driving vehicles, or do you want to look at all of your pieces of equipment in vehicles? So we took the effort in creating this program to encompass all of the City of Manitou Springs fleet and equipment. So it includes not only vehicles, it includes the electric bikes that the fire department uses. It includes the UTVs that various departments use, the loaders, the bulldozers, the Vactors, everything that the city has. So what is the purpose of the fleet management procedures is what I put it, call it policies and procedures. It's really not a plan. Next slide, please. And I apologize. I think I have some animations in a couple of these slides, so I may ask for a couple of extra clicks. But let me just give you a brief overview of the purpose, an overview of the plan, 3 of the highlights, and then I'll address some of your questions as it may come up for the plan. Next slide, please. So really the purpose was to put together and document and ensure that the City of Manitou Springs' vehicles and equipment are selected, acquired, utilized, and maintained in an environmentally responsive and an economical manner. So what we did was we came up with a comprehensive list of policies and procedures to achieve that purpose. And in addition to that, we had to create some complementary documents. So I created a comprehensive fleet inventory that includes all of the vehicles in the City of Manitou Springs, a maintenance log for use by the Public Works Department and the other fleet managers in the city, service plans, which I'll talk a little bit about, and replacement schedules. One of the things that Roy asked me to take a look at was coming up with some metrics that are used throughout the industry to determine when are the best practices and the best time periods for replacing specific vehicles in public works fleets. So we did some research and we came up with a set of criteria that will help guide the replacement process. And some highlights that I want to touch on. We've identified an alternative fuels policy for the City of Manitou Springs. We also have identified a brand new idling policy for use by all city employees. And as I mentioned, a replacement schedule. and some criteria to drive that schedule. Next slide, please. So overview, I need a click. The policies in the plan, there are a set of over a half a dozen policies that include basic policy that identifies that the city of Manitou Springs is the entity responsible for the management of its fleet. We incorporated the existing vehicle usage policy that is in the employee handbook, and we basically just incorporated that verbatim. We address simple things like, smoking and vaping in vehicles, eating and drinking in vehicles, phone use in vehicles. As you know, that's a real big deal. And also safety. We've identified in there that as a policy, if a driver comes across a vehicle and it appears to not be safe to drive, it's that driver's responsibility to not drive that vehicle and bring it to management attention. And we, as I mentioned, the idling policy, and I have a couple of slides on that. I'll go through that. There are a bunch of different procedures in this policy. As I mentioned, the usage procedures, we've identified how the vehicles in Manitou Springs are going to be identified. We've identified the process and procedures for modification of vehicles. Also, misuse and abuse, accident reporting, vehicle cleaning, and vehicle licensing procedures. In addition to the procedures and the policies, set out a set of responsibilities. One of the things that I learned in putting this plan together is the city doesn't have a sole fleet management source. You don't have a department that just manages fleet. It's pretty much handled in three different areas. Police takes care of their vehicles, and they have a local automotive shop that they use for simple repairs and service. Public Works, Parks has Mr. John Todd up in the Public Works yard. He does a really good job of maintaining and working on all of the parks in the Public Works fleet. For those vehicles that he can't work on, some of the bigger equipment, some of the larger, newer equipment, he does send that out to contract facilities for repair. And then you have the fire department. The fire department has a very robust inventory. They can tell you how many aspirins they have in each one of the trucks that they drive. They also keep their own maintenance and service logs and records. So you've got three independent groups, and I try to put together a set of responsibilities so that each of the department directors and the fleet managers that are delegated by those department directors, let me clarify, there really aren't any fleet managers, but there are staff members within those departments that are identified as people who maintain the fleet for those areas. As I mentioned, John Todd is the individual for Public Works. In addition to that, the city of Manitou Springs has a very robust finance and procurement process. I added some complementary pieces to the procurement processes, mostly to establish the desire to pursue alternative fueled vehicles to the greatest extent practicable. And in addition to that, I suggested and I recommended and I provided some information for the use of the state's quantity purchasing agreements for purchasing of additional fleet vehicles or fleet apparatus. The state has a very robust website, and they have very competitive pricing. And so I encouraged the use of looking at that website for future purchases. And then in addition, we identified a variety of different elements for vehicle maintenance and repair. There's a general policy. We have a prioritization. We developed a prioritization for doing repairs. Things like modifications to a vehicle are low priority. Public safety and public service vehicles are of high priority. So when they go down, they get fixed first. We've got some clarification for maintenance or in disrepair, but still operational. So if you need to still use the car, there's some criteria that we put in place that will establish the appropriate time to still use a car when it may need maintenance or repair. And we also just identified a variety of different criteria to use for quick fixes and repair, after-hour fleet support, emergency fleet support, issuing of parts, so forth and so on. One thing that I did identify is in the policies document, the city of Manitou Springs does not rely heavily on pool vehicles, and it doesn't maintain a pool of vehicles. So I just identified that if that's something that we want to change in the future, we certainly can. There is a very robust process of rotating vehicles. As vehicles in the police department get too old for that critical use, they get moved down to public works and other areas within the city for staff use and just local passenger use. So I think that the city is really getting a maximum out of its fleet. But we needed to sit down and document and figure out how we wanted to move forward. And so what we did with this is just to try to provide a starting point for how the city can continue to better manage and keep a hands on the inventory of your fleet. One of the highlights that I wanted to mention, pass me through about 3 clicks, please. Are the highlights. As I mentioned, I know I've worked with the city of Manitou Springs for almost a decade now, since after the Waldo Canyon fire. And I fully understand that this council and the citizens of this city have a very robust environmental ethic. And so I thought it was important to identify an alternative fuel policy that would encourage the use of alternative fuel vehicles to the extent that we can, without compromising any of the city functionality. So currently there are only 2 electric vehicles in the city fleet, and those are 2 bicycles. But I fully anticipate that with the construction of the charging stations at the pool, I believe that the city will want to pursue more purchases in the future of electric vehicles. The idling policy is twofold. We want to reduce the unnecessary consumption of fuel, and we want to reduce our contribution to greenhouse gases. And vehicle idling policies are a really good method to achieve those. The idling policy provides guidelines for heavy trucks and construction equipment in addition to passenger vehicles. And of course, we have exemptions to the policies. So in a nutshell, the guidelines are for heavy equipment and trucks during the winter months, start those pieces of equipment up, let them idle for 15 minutes, let them warm up, let them pressurize, and then use them. For light duty vehicles and passenger vehicles, the use of idling is discouraged unless the vehicle has auxiliary equipment that is being used at the time, and the vehicle needs to idle in order to maintain electricity to those auxiliary equipment. Or in the event that a field staff may be sitting in his vehicle or her vehicle in the winter or in the summer completing a report, then certainly the vehicle can idle to keep the car warm or cool, whatever's necessary. But just leaving a vehicle idling because it's convenient is I don't want to say prohibited, but is against the policy.
Julie?
Police cars are exempt. And likewise, so are the fire trucks. Now, if they want to shut their car off, that's certainly fine, but we didn't we didn't. Any other questions about the idling policy? Next slide, please. So the benchmarks, and I'm going to have to get my little cheater sheet out here because I can't read that from here online. So what we identified is a series of vehicle types. And Roy and I actually did a lot of this research, and most of this is taken from the city of Philadelphia, who has a very robust fleet and fleet management program. And what we came up with were for radio patrol cars, basically at 125,000 miles or 5 years, those vehicles should be replaced. On marked police cars, same mileage, but 8 years. Medic units, 5 years, fire pumpers, 12 years or 100,000. It's all laid out there. What I did also in the development of the fleet inventory spreadsheet, there is a sheet in the back where I incorporate these criteria and establish a replacement schedule. It's not really a replacement schedule, it's a replacement indicator. So I created some spreadsheet with some formulas that brought this criteria in, and it will allow the fleet managers to identify when vehicles are due for replacement and approaching replacement. And some of the criteria that I used to do the notifications were, I backed off if a piece of equipment had a criteria of hours, let's say, for example, a air compressor. You have several air compressors that you drive around town and you use. You're not racking up miles on those, you're racking up hours on those. And so in the spreadsheet, some criteria are just based on hours, and in others, it's based on miles. And in both cases, if the replacement year is within 1.5 years of the date, it will be flagged as approaching the need for replacement. So we give a little heads up. It's not an end all be all. It's a criteria to take a look at the vehicles and determine whether or not they should be replaced. There are several pieces of equipment and several trucks in the fleet that are over 15 years old. In a couple cases, a couple pieces of equipment over 20 years old, but they're very expensive. They have few hours and they have a high intrinsic value. When you need them, you're going to need them. A bulldozer, for example, such like that. So just because some of the replacement criteria may be met doesn't necessarily mean that that piece of equipment or that vehicle should be auctioned, but it gives you an indication of when you need to start looking at that. Okay, next slide. That is the bulk of that is the bulk of my presentation. I do have a couple of complementary slides on the back side of this. If you're interested in knowing some basic numbers about the fleet, I can share those with you.
I think that'd be good. You've got it. So why don't you walk us through that?
Okay, next slide, please. And I'm gonna have to look at that. I apologize. When you're doing these PowerPoint presentations, it's hard to tell how big these numbers and stuff are going to come out on the spreadsheet. But in essence, there's a breakdown by department. There's a total of 111 vehicles and pieces of equipment that are documented in the inventory. And so that's a breakdown by department of the numbers. Obviously, Public Works has the largest. Water department has and fire department have the next, and police is behind them. Then I did it by fuel type. Clearly, the bulk of all of our vehicles are gasoline or diesel. There is one propane, and I need to look up there. I can't see what that green slide is. The green one up there. I can't see it. I'm sorry. None. Oh, because those are trailers. That's what that is. Those are the trailers. Electrics are identified in there. That they're a real small little sliver in there. Next slide, please. This is the count by vehicle type. That you have one antique, and most of them are heavy duty trucks. You have a significant number of heavy duty pieces of equipment, and then you fall into light duty equipment and onwards. So that's just another way of looking at it. Next slide. This is one sheet of the inventory. And in this particular worksheet, it's not the whole of the inventory, it's the first 40 rows. I just used it for an example. But in there, I identified the criteria for replacement. Red is red. I did that because the replacement criteria had to be broken up for miles and hours, because we have those two universes of what we're tracking. So we just use the criteria, and if you trigger the 1.5 years or 1,000 miles or 10,000 miles or 500 hours of use, then you're in a replacement mode. And then you hit yellow for the mileage in there when I'm gonna pull this up on my sheet real quick so I can just read it. Yeah. 10 to 20,000 miles left. And then then you're basically starting to look at those pieces of equipment and wanting to determine whether or not it's time to go. Next slide. And that was it. Go back to that previous slide, please, because I think there might have been some questions on there. So what you can see in there is it's the entire inventory. And then on the very far right is where I identify the replacement year, the replacement miles, and the replacement hours. Some of the columns in there have a value in an air note of value in the replacement hours. That's simply because that particular vehicle doesn't have any hours that it tracks. Likewise, when you see it in the miles column, then that's more than likely going to be a trailer or other piece of equipment that doesn't track miles. Now, I mentioned earlier, and I'm sorry, it's a live system and I don't have any slides on it, but as I mentioned earlier, the city purchased a subscription to Verizon Connect, which is a vehicle tracking service that is provided by Verizon. Each vehicle that is identified to be tracked is given a little USB, not a USB, it's a OBD port device that mounts up underneath the dash. Nobody has to do anything. It turns on as soon as the car turns on, and it allows us to track the location, but it also provides a series of matrices. In addition to that, there are service plans that you can create. I'm in the process right now of creating service plans for the fleet. I've developed 2 service plans right now in Verizon Connect for the police department fleet. Chief Otto was very interested in wanting to get this going. So in that, we identify a notification of when they should start thinking about servicing the vehicle. There's 2 service plans, one for preventative maintenance, which includes oil filter and fluids checks and tire checks. And then there is a tire replacement service plan that I created that basically will prompt an inspection of the tires every 4,000 miles and a rotation or a replacement if needed every 5,000 miles. The police department goes through a lot of tires. What we're going to do is we're going to link the spreadsheets with existing expenditure spreadsheets that Public Works is using, and then upload that data, mileages, the vehicle identification, mileages, hours, and the dates, or not the dates, the mileages of the last services, so that we can start the clock and getting those notifications going for those folks. We're going to work those out. Each fleet manager and each department director will be notified of when a vehicle is due for maintenance. So it's just not one person that we're counting on saying, hey, take the vehicle down to the shop. That's going to be further developed and expanded to include all of the Department of Public Works and the parks vehicles. It doesn't include the fire department vehicles because I said earlier, they've got their own system and they were very clear. They just want to be part of the inventory, but they want to be left independent when it comes to managing their fleet because their vehicles are very unique. So that's what we've got for you tonight. I hope that you view this as a starting point. There's going to need to be an ongoing dedication of resources to keeping this up to date. I met with Public Works staff earlier in the day, and we are going to continue meeting over the next couple of weeks to refine these spreadsheets and link them together so that when an individual documents the vehicle maintenance and service costs, it will update all the spreadsheets at one time, and we don't have to spend a whole lot of time doing data entry. But that's next steps with this program.
Thank you. Roy, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I just want to say, we took a lot of time to do this. Again, hearing council, their concerns about how we've been managing our fleets. And I do think we have a good plan in place. And now it's up to me to make sure it continues. But my thought is that whether it's once a year or quarterly or whatever, if council needs to know how things are going, we can easily present where we're at with the fleets as the council would need. So we know that. But I appreciate John and his efforts. He was a big help. And we got a nice program, an Excel program that he developed that's just a snippet of, which we could show it tonight. We do have it that we can bring it up. If you want to see the program, just let us know. But I guess I just want to know if there's other questions from council and thoughts, something maybe we missed, or what we can do to improve. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you. First of all, I'm very excited about this program. I know that might sound odd that someone gets excited about a fleet management program, but I am. Couple things. One is, and I was also very excited to hear a lot of your stuff that you've been doing that is not in the policy that we had, because I wasn't aware of there was a lot of directed maintenance in the policy, but nowhere did it talk about documenting any of that maintenance. So I would, and then linking it back to cost. So thank you for talking about that. Secondly, there were 3 times that city council was mentioned, and I thought those mentions were very odd. On page 4, 9, and 12, it talked about things like the vehicles being titled and licensed to city council. And it talked about fleet vehicles belonging to city council. And I did not understand that reference at all. So I will just leave you with that. And if you can take another look at that, because I can't imagine that has been how our process, that they're licensed to city council. Anyway, so pages 4, 9, and 12 is, I was also very happy about the criteria or the indicators that you talked about in the policy about when to start looking at vehicles for replacement, and a good solid decision-making process for that, which made a lot of sense to me. Thank you for doing that. And then I would also recommend that you not quote the employee manual directly in the policy. I'd recommend that for those things you reference the employee policy so that you don't have to change this one or that one if things change in one or the other. So those were my comments. Thank you very much. Oh, one other thing. I was up on Ute Pass Trail a couple of weeks ago, and there's a vehicle up there, a backhoe or something. Are you? I was just intrigued to see a Manitou Springs vehicle up there.
I'd have to look into that. I'm not sure.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to surprise you, but
on Ute
we
Pass?
thought on the Ute Pass Trail, we
Okay.
thought, and we're like, what the heck is that doing out here?
I will-
There'd been some work up there, so maybe that was why it was up there. I don't know.
Let me find out.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
not sure.
thanks. It was a backhoe. I don't know. I don't know
Okay.
my vehicles, but I'm guessing.
It could be grading of roads.
Or grading, yeah. and that.
And that's what I'm thinking, but
Yeah, yeah.
I'll confirm that it's just not parked there, I guess, or thank you. It's being used, no doubt. So for a reason, yeah. Thanks.
Julie?
Thanks. I'm so happy you're doing this. This is fabulous. I think it'll really help in terms of anticipating future budget needs, so that we're not hit last minute with finding out that we have to replace a whole bunch of vehicles the same year. So I think it's great. When you mentioned ongoing dedication of resources to keep these up to date, can you elaborate on that for us?
Sure. Well, as I mentioned, there isn't a dedicated fleet management role that looks over the entire fleet for the city. And so at a department level, we need to, in order to keep the service records and the service plan notifications and everything working, we need to make sure that when a piece of equipment is sent out or brought in for repair, that at that time we document the mileage, the date, the vehicle, and the repair and the cost. Now, those things have been being documented over the years, but they've been in a manner that isn't easy to analyze. For example, when I started, the fleet inventory was in a Word table. And Word is great for doing documents, but you can't, if you put stuff in a table, you can't manipulate it, you can't filter it, you can't do anything that you can in Excel. So I brought everything into Excel so that we can do graphs and we can start to look at things like that. But someone will have to have the responsibility to make sure that when you're putting in the invoices or documenting the invoices, that you also put into this, the worksheets here, what those mileages are. So today, and this is going to be kind of hard, but today I met with a couple of the folks that are responsible for doing that. And we came up with a small little worksheet, if you will, that has maybe 5 or 6 elements: the date, the vehicle, the mileage, the hours, what was done, and the cost. So that doesn't take a lot of time to put stuff in. And instead of putting it into a Word document or in a notebook, one of the staff people does everything in hard copy, and he's got great records, but it's in hard copy. So we're bringing all that into the spreadsheets now. And so when one of the individuals starts to document what they spent and identifying which bill goes to police and which one goes to parks and which one goes to water, we basically just have them capture those 4 required elements: the vehicle, the mileage or hours, and the cost and what was done. They put that in and we'll link everything together so that it gets updated in these other files. And then when you want to report, Roy or I or one of the administrative assistants can pull that file up and there you have it. But that's what I meant by that. Currently, no one is responsible for tracking vehicle costs. And so we've got to just piecemeal that for those individuals that are tracking costs. I'm asking them, just pull a little bit out. Don't want to make your life harder, but I need this little bit more information.
So yeah, that was, because that was one of my concerns during the presentation. I thought, well, this all sounds fabulous, but if we don't have anyone actually responsible and actually doing the data entry that needs to be done, what's the point, you know? And I wasn't sure if that comment about you better fund this or else it's not going to work, that was how I interpreted it. But it doesn't sound like you're necessarily indicating that you think we need more staff. You just think that the staff who are here just need to stay on task and do what you've asked.
Exactly.
So,
Okay.
and I can answer that because part of this program was the idea it's simple enough that we can add it to a current staff's workload. And so I have identified 2 staff members at Public Works that will take on that role. So they will continue to bring it in, bring the data into the system. And then part of my job is going to be just reviewing that and make sure it's continuing to happen on a regular basis.
And how about the role in all the other departments that have vehicles? Who's going to do?
Oh, the 2 staff members are going to, except for police and
Oh, they're
fire.
going to handle not just Public Works.
So Public Works, Park and Recreation, engineering, they will handle all that data entry, which is most of it,
Everything other than the fire department.
and police department.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
They'll handle their own.
And do we need to hire a consultant in order to get the reports to analyze this data?
No,
Because you mentioned, you know, you could hire, this is something that will be self-executing.
Once we finish linking all of the spreadsheets together, then I'm pretty much done.
Okay.
then it's on us.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Judith?
Thank you, Mayor. This is just amazing and thorough. What a wonderful presentation. First of all, I'm thrilled about the alternative fuels policy that segues nicely into the next topic that we'll be talking about, sustainability. So anything that we can put on that list is wonderful. And for us to be thinking toward the future of when we're replacing a vehicle, if we can get a hybrid or electric vehicle, that is just amazing. Mayor Pro Tem Fortune and I caught the same thing with regards to the Manitou Springs City Council vehicles. It's mentioned numerous times, including on page 6. So I think that just a thorough walkthrough on that. We'll clean up that. And then I did have one question. This is page 5 of the 14-page procedure manual on under phone use. You do a really good job of describing the protocol of when someone wants to make a call or is receiving a call while they're driving. And I'm just wondering, the first sentence of that paragraph says cell phone use while driving is discouraged. Would it not be more prudent to say cell phone use while driving is generally prohibited? And doesn't that segue better with the state laws on texting and talking on the phone?
You want to?
I can address that. That certainly was some writer's privilege that I took. I didn't want to come across as too draconian and say, no, vehicle, no, but certainly if that's a preference that you would like to soften that a little bit, I think that is.
I just think from, I
Or-
just
or-
read
or-
that paragraph and I'm
or
just
make it
thinking from a
harder.
potential liability issue. I think
Mhm.
it would, I would feel more comfortable if it said, something like generally prohibited, because again, the rest of that paragraph, you do an outstanding job of detailing exactly what the protocol is. So that would be my only question, concern about that paragraph. And I think that does it for me. Thank
Well,
you.
I can, thinking about that, I believe our SOP actually prohibits it anyway, so we probably need to
Yeah.
make sure it references the,
Yeah,
like
I
someone
think the
mentioned, yes.
consistency is important.
so we reference our SOPs in the manual in that way one place, but it is prohibited to drive and text.
So I
Unless it's a
think that should
Bluetooth. You
go
can
through.
talk on the Bluetooth, but you can't text.
Correct.
That was part of my rationale in doing the discouraged also. was-
So either that sentence needs to say cell phone use while driving is prohibited, or that sentence needs to be just eliminated.
Yeah, I think
Because it
we'll-
does talk about hands-free Bluetooth
Mhm.
use and
I think we'll reference, like was suggested by Ms. Fortune, to our documents, and that way we have one place where it's changing and it's consistent. We don't have then, oops, we didn't change that one. So thanks for catching that. Yeah.
And my last question or comment is that, so when we have our annual budget retreat in October, and it's coming up next month, when we have a department that requests a replacement vehicle, will we get more data now? We will say, for example, we need a new vehicle for the police department. Will that information be included, like it aged out, or this is where it went, or this car went to Public Works? Will we have more decision-making information with regards to making decisions about replacing a vehicle now?
I think it will be important to use this document to let council know the why. So when we do come to the council meeting, we can show you the why. So it hit the red line and now it's time to change, and then be able to say, yeah, because it hit the mileage. Or it could be that we identified it, even if it didn't hit the mileage. There could be, because the other side of this, as we do maintenance, if we're constantly bringing in the vehicle into maintenance, which occurs when you get a lemon, whatever you want to call it, that kind of vehicle, we may have to say, this vehicle has costed us more and it's not worth it regardless of the miles or the hours. So I think that we should be presenting the reasons behind us asking for equipment, and that should be part of that. Yeah.
That's all I've got. In excellent work, great work product. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other council members? I guess not. I'd like to compliment you too on the work that you've done. I think this it's a good solution. It points us in I think a good direction. I like the fact that it's simple once it's set up, and that we can just maintain it on a regular basis, and we should have, good information at our fingertips so we can make, better decisions, informed decisions. I mean, when I say we, most of that's going to fall on staff shoulders, but certainly when it comes to city council at budget time, we'll know that we'll have greater confidence that we're actually squeezing as much life out of things as we can. I was especially happy to see the idling policy, and this is kind of been a sore point with me. A couple of years ago, just walking around town, I would see city vehicles that were idling on days that weren't really cold and days that were warm but not sweltering hot. So people were using air conditioning and heating, and the vehicles were empty, and it just drove me crazy. It happened just a few times. I'd mentioned it to Denise and the situation seemed to, it got better. So that message got out. So I appreciate that. But I think this takes us a step further. In a town that aspires to have a strong environmental ethic, and a good fiscal ethic too. It drove me crazy to see us burning up gasoline for no reason and polluting the air. So this is a step forward, and I want to thank staff for what you've done. I know you've actually been working on this in the background for a couple of years now. So thank you. Cheers, yes, sir.
Yeah, just one last thing. I didn't want to miss these, but we require staff in each vehicle to fill out a daily inspection log, and then these are submitted each month, and Alicia picks them up, and if a department doesn't turn it in, then she lets me know and I find out what's going on with that department. So we have these logs, we keep them on file, we save them for CIRSA as well. But it's the whole inspection of every piece of every vehicle before they drive it, and then indicating problems and things like that. So just wanted to let you know, we have these books as well.
Great. Any other questions or comments? Denise?
Mayor, I just want to mention, with the use of technology, it usually saves time, and we'll talk about that, or we talked about that before with the invoice policy that we put in place. Took a while to get the technology in place, but now we save about 15 hours a week by using technology. And that will happen with this too. Once we get everything in place and people start inputting the data, we'll find that we really save time, and we save the vehicle over time by doing the proper maintenance. So it's a positive. It just takes some time to get there.
Great. Thank you. If council has no further questions, I think we can move on.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Chavez, thank you. Roy, thank you. Okay. Council, we're almost at 7:20. Usually we take a break around 7:30. Would you like to take a break now before we go into the next topic? Or, okay, let's come back at 7:30. Thank you. We can go ahead and get started again. Okay, so the next agenda item is our environmental sustainability report. Our PIO, Alex Treaty, is going to be presenting that. Alex, did I give you enough time there to? Okay, sorry, didn't mean to rush you.
Good evening, Mayor Graham, Manitou Springs City Council. My name is Alex Treffry. I'm the Public Information Officer for the City of Manitou Springs. I will be presenting a PowerPoint presentation in regards to our environmentally sustainable practices report, which is a lot more in depth than the presentation, which is in the packet. So next slide, please. So I do want to start this off with just talking about the word sustainability and how we're using it here. The word sustainability gets tossed around a lot in various different aspects of things from operations to what we're talking about here, environmental sustainability. So I do just want to make it clear that this is in regards to environmental sustainability specifically. So yeah, let's start it off. There's a ton of info here. So as we all know, there's no silver bullet to environmental sustainability. It's many small things or larger things combined that really make you environmentally sustainable. So city staff across departments has many various techniques, practices, or projects that contribute to this. I've broken them down into sections, and those sections are, excuse me, car reduction, energy efficiency, landscapes, protecting our waterways, reducing our footprint, transitioning to digital, and water conservation. And I think it's worth noting that these efforts don't just reduce our impact on the environment. Many, many times they just make sense. They assist staff with various tech or various things that they do every day, or they improve our workflow processes, or they make us more transparent with the public, like with digital, using digital items instead of everything being in paper. So not everything here is just as if we're spending extra funding or extra time to be sustainable. Really, it's smart operationally, but also it reduces our impact on the environment. So it's really two-pronged with many of these. Next slide, please. So I wanted to talk about Resolution 1919, also known as the Environmental Resolution. I think we're all aware of it, but I'll touch on it. It was passed in September of 2019, and it established 17 goals, which you can see in the report. I'm not going to read them all verbatim, but they all touch on the following items: protecting pollinators, protecting trees, conducting a food assessment, eliminating single-use plastics, addressing hazardous waste disposal, sustainable municipal operations and facilities, energy efficient businesses and homes, a creek watch program, public education about air pollution, composting, green building standards, green transportation, monitor and reporting progress, and creating the use of a project coordinator. So as we all know, there's a lot in there, and we're going to kind of unpack all that we've done within the report. And it's worth noting that it's not on the PowerPoint presentation because it would look very funky, but in the report, each of these 17 goals, if there is something in the report that translates to them, you can see a star marking that. I hope that made sense. Next slide, please. So we'll start with car reduction. We have expanded bicycle infrastructure and parking quite extensively, and that's something that we, of course, continue to do. We've also focused on the importance of e-bikes, as we all know, with the voucher program that we just are beginning to implement, as well as using Pike Ride, et cetera. In addition, we have the electric trams, which we've also recently talked about. Also, we've expanded trails and increased maintenance on them because those are very important for getting around via bicycle and therefore not a car. We're all aware of the free incline reservation system, which of course during peak summer times can reduce tens of thousands of cars in a single month. The introduction of mobility hubs, of course, we're all aware of the one slated for Hiawatha Gardens. And then it's interesting to see it this way because we always think about the public facing ways of reducing cars, but even internally through HR processes, we have remote work options and virtual interviews. It reduces that single car trip, but over time it really does add up, as do all of these efforts, right? And then also the introduction of wayfinding, which you see with that picture there, reduces cruising in Manitou Springs. So although it's not taking a car off of the road, it's reducing how long it is on the road. Next slide, please. And then for energy efficiency, we have the energy efficiency rebate program through the Housing Advisory Board and the Planning Department, essentially incentivizing energy efficient appliances in homes. The implementation of LED lighting, phasing out old lighting like fluorescent bulbs, things like that. Also the introduction of motion detection lighting to where a light is only on when it needs to be, as opposed to having to manually turn it off and on, as we all forget to do that. And then also an investment grade audit, which also recently council was aware of during a presentation by Schneider Electric, but will soon be, well, we're conducting it now, an investment grade audit, which is very in depth for all city facilities, going over, I mean, essentially every square foot of them and seeing everything that we can do to make those facilities more efficient. Next slide, please. And then for landscapes, there is just really it's the idea of maintaining natural landscapes and using the native plants to create the landscapes of Manitou Springs and not bringing in those foreign species that may harm the environment over a period of time. Also, we have the organic land management policy, which our Parks and Recreation Department uses, which is really that gold standard of using techniques and materials that don't harm the environment. And then, as we're all aware, as I like to brag about all the time, we are the world's first municipal pollinator district, which is a great step forward towards protecting pollinators in the region and around Manitou Springs. And then we also have the tree ordinance, which has multi-pronged approaches towards protecting trees and heritage trees in Manitou Springs and ensuring that trees are replenished after and if they need to be removed. And then we have the policies and procedures to address that. Next slide, please. And then for protecting our waterways, there's of course the cleanups and rounds that we make on the creek regularly as staff, but then there's also the partnerships and cleanup events that we have. Creek Week is coming up in early October, and those are great efforts where it's community-wide and even organization-wide to ensure that our creeks are kept clean and we're removing trash from them. There's also dog waste management, so making it easily accessible for somebody to pick up their dog waste, having bags at every park and easy ways to dispose of them. And then of course, chemical disposal. It's really a no-brainer, but how to get rid of chemicals. Those are the Pool and Fitness Center uses many chemicals for the pool to keep it up to standards that it must. And so when they have to get rid of those chemicals, it's ensuring that we're doing it in a safe and proper way to make sure that those are not getting in the waterway. And then we also have our MS4 permit, which is, it has a high standard that we need to meet yearly with various initiatives and education pieces and much more to ensure that we keep that and we can continue to protect our waterway with the standards that we must comply with through that. Next slide, please. And then reducing our footprint. We have one part of it is electronics recycling. So making it easy for Manitou Springs residents to recycle hard to recycle electronics such as laptops or printers or old TVs, things like that. The fact is that if you don't give somebody those easy ways to recycle them, they'll put it at the bottom of their trash bin. And it goes into a landfill, which is horrible for the environment, which we all know. So we have a recycling event coming up to address that, to where Manitou Springs residents can bring those. I'll be working on announcing that soon once we finish some things. And then also for electric mobility, the parking mobility department is piloting using the small electric vehicles to get around Manitou Springs, as opposed to having a standard gas vehicle, when a smaller vehicle can do it just the same. And the same goes with UTVs, which are like the small Polarises. They of course have a much smaller emissions that they produce compared to a car where they do an equal job. As we all know, in Manitou Springs, you never need to go fast. So both of these vehicles are traveling at the same rate of speed with just less emissions. And then increasing EV charging infrastructure. You can see the picture on the slide right there of the ribbon cutting we had for the EV charging infrastructure at Hiawatha Gardens. That of course incentivizes use of EV vehicles for frequent visitors, perhaps downtown employees or residents as well. So it's great to have that, and it's great to expand that. Oh, and then refurbishing and refill programs. So the city doesn't have them internally where the city manages them, but they have helped financially to start those to ensure that, it's reducing those single-use plastics. And it's a big positive for people to be able to refill, for instance, like detergents without having to buy a new plastic bottle every single time. And then in addition, next slide, please. Sorry. We have composting programs, which is the same as the refill. The city doesn't have the composting program, but they have assisted with the beginning stages of that to ensure that there is a way for Manitou Springs residents to compost, which there was not before. And in addition, the city uses solar power a great deal. We have a SunShare contract with Colorado Springs Utilities, where most, if not all of our the power that the city uses is through a sun garden in Colorado Springs, which is phenomenal. And then also things such as, it's called the No Smoke 2, but it's really just an addition to our fire engines, which of course are big engines that could produce a lot of emissions, but with that addition, they produce almost zero. And then using eco-friendly traffic paint. Traffic paint can be very toxic if it gets in a waterway, and it slowly chips away over time, as we all know. So it's important that we use that eco-friendly paint. And then also refurbishing first. And what we mean by that is, and the best example I can think of is just if we can reuse something, then we should. With the new city hall remodel, if you all have been in the back offices for planning and administration, you'll notice that the doors to the meeting room are the older doors from the council chamber. So it's just the older council chamber. It's just a great way to, if we can use something again, then we should, and they look great. So again, that double use there. And then also some things that we don't think about, right? Public Works using a new innovative dirt sifter, which allows them to reuse dirt, reuse crushed asphalt or concrete, with something just as simple as that, being able to separate it more in a better way. And again, that just makes it easier for the staff to complete that job. So it's again, that two-pronged benefit. And then low impact development and permeable surfaces. This is all within the Land Use and Development Code that was passed earlier this year, I believe, late last year, recently. And that it just has those requirements for instance, if a site has exceeds the parking requirements, then they have to create vegetative landscapes and have those low impact development standards that they must follow. It's same with the green building standards with Pikes Peak Regional Building Department's new building code. There are those green building standards to ensure that new commercial and residential structures are designed to be solar ready and things such as that. There's a lot within those two codes that I could get into, but I will leave it there. Next slide, please. And then transition to digital, getting away from just using paper documents and using digital documents. So Bluebeam is the software that we use for plan reviews. Plans can be many hundreds of papers for giant papers for one single project. And so using Bluebeam not only allows us to work with Pikes Peak Regional much more easily, but it also eliminates having to print those plans out and bring them in. And then in addition, forms and agendas are all online. We're all using a computer here, so makes sense. We have the use of eForce, which is through the police department and our court system for having digital records in regards to criminal justice. All of our HR processes are online through Civic HR. Our records management is online through Documents on Demand. All of our invoices are now processed through something called Stamply, which really automates that process as well. Our parking kiosks allow people to use text to pay, which reduces receipts that come from those kiosks. And then, of course, anyone can pay their water bill online using Express Bill Pay. With all of this combined together, we did the math and we estimate that over 166,000 pieces of paper are saved annually because of these processes, which is an extreme amount. And it just goes to show it's almost like a smaller ecosystem where we can show that all of the small processes really add up to something big. I mean, that's a lot of pieces of paper. Next slide, please. And then for water conservation in 2022, we we sponsored a program for free sprinkler evaluations for any Manitou Springs resident who wanted it. Almost always there are inefficiencies in the sprinkler system, so that's always helpful. We provide leak detection tablets for anybody who wants to come in and get them through our finance office. An average leaky toilet wastes more than 6,000 gallons of water a month. So that's very important to fix. It adds up over time for sure. We also have the shower head exchange program where residents can bring in old shower heads for new water conscious ones. And then we also, as a city, are phasing out old sprinkler heads. Then, of course, we have the WaterWise standards that we are always recommending residents to follow. Again, with those, it just makes sense to follow WaterWise practices. No one should be watering their yard 5 days a week. And then also with the use of the new Vector truck, it recycles the water as opposed to always using new water. And before we were using about 20,000 gallons of water weekly. Now we're using only 2,700. So again, a big benefit there. Next slide, please. And so again, with environmental sustainability, there is no silver bullet, but there's also no finished line. You never say, okay, we're done. We did it. You can always be improving on yourself and always making making less of an impact on the environment. And so I think that a good path forward is to always approach sustainability the same way that I kind of outlined it, in small steps and always making that progress. We can continue to expand digital initiatives and enhance water conservation. We can continue to promote renewable energy, sustainable landscaping, and ways to strengthen our waterway protection, as well as green transportation, sustainable building, provide community education about all of that, monitor the progress, collaborate together. And then leave no trace is something that we are very recently working with, but it's very important. And it's about when you enjoy our natural environment, to leave it as you came to it, and leave no trace. And then also something that we're doing with the new arborists, amazing arborists that we have, is diversifying our tree canopy so it's more resistant to any changes that we have, or, you know, the tree diseases that come through, things such as that. So that's always important. And then also, as we're all aware, Plan Manitou is getting an update. And so all of this and environmental sustainability could always be incorporated in those new goals of the updated Plan Manitou. And as I mentioned earlier, we have that recycle event happening, which is extremely important to keep those electronics out of landfills. And then also there is that possibility for, after the Plan Manitou update, perhaps updating the environmental creating a new environmental resolution with new goals and new milestones for the city to reach. That is all I had.
Council, I'm sure we have questions or comments for Alex. Who would? Natalie.
Sure. So I have two questions. The first one is this the second time you've given a presentation like this? How many times have you been tracking and sharing?
So I've never given a presentation to city council about this. I have tracked a lot of this just for our webpage that we have just about sustainability, so we can kind of share it. But no, this is like the first report I've put together that I've like formalized, and then the first formal presentation.
Okay. And then my second one was, this will go on the website, this information?
Yes, I mean, yes. So the report will definitely go on the website for sure. And then it really is already on the website. I'm sure the webpage could use some updating after this presentation, but it's almost essentially there.
Judith, did you have a comment?
Yes, I have several comments. Sustainability being my baby, being involved with Resolution 1919 intimately. I have a number of questions, Alex. First of all, with regards to the incline reservation system, is that being enforced in any way? Do we have people up there? I mean, what's going on with that? We haven't gotten a report on that in a very long time.
I guess, can you like specify?
Do we have attendants up there? We used to, are they still?
I can answer that. So we still meet with, is this on?
Yeah.
Okay. Do we still meet with the incline, Colorado Springs Incline, quarterly? And they have reports, they show us what's going on. And so we still are tracking the number of users that are signing in like we did before. So we're keeping track of use.
We used to get minutes of those meetings and that's kind of dropped off. I would like to take a look at those. One of the reasons I bring this up is number one, if it's on a slide, I want to make sure that we are actually walking the walk and talking the talk. There's a number of Facebook sites where you can go and talk to people who are saying, bypass the incline reservation system. You can just go. There's nobody, watching out for you. And I've had a number of residents concerned about that. So am I hearing you saying that there are attendants up there every day or what's the situation there?
Every day, there's been a occasion, one or two times where they didn't have staff. They had a staff shortage, but as far as I'm concerned, in the last 2 months, there hasn't been any report to us that they were short staffed. So they do go early in the morning. I believe it's 6 a.m. and then they leave. At this time, I think it's 4 p.m. That'll change soon with the winter or the weather changing, but
Do those attendants turn away people that don't have a reservation? What's the procedure up there?
what they do first is they see if there's room on the reservation program at the site, since they can log them in there, and then that's where they log them in if there's room. So they do allow that walk-ups if there's space available, but they encourage sign up ahead of time. And so far, again, it's been working pretty well with the numbers based on the data they're showing us.
So we only have data from individuals who actually make a reservation, though. I mean,
Correct.
that's the only data that we
That's
have.
correct.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay,
You're welcome.
just want to follow up on that. You mentioned permeable surfaces. Is there a project that we are looking at starting to use permeable surfaces?
While he's looking, I can tell you one that we're doing at the Creek Walk Trail behind the chamber. So we'll be putting the grid there as a pilot test, and that actually, I believe, will be done by the end of the week, if not by early next week.
Is that from where the concrete ends at the bridge to Mayfair? Is that,
No, it will be across the bridge behind
Oh.
the chamber.
okay,
So right now it's just dirt and what it was asphalt,
right.
but we're going to put the grid there. And so that'll be our first grid surface to test out.
Excellent. Good. Thank you for that. We were promised a tree canopy assessment. I haven't seen that yet. When can we expect to see the tree canopy report?
So it is being worked on. I know that Matthew, our arborist, has been taking care of this trimming of the trees at this point because of the growth this year with all the rain, but I would have to confirm where we're at with that report, and I can get it to Denise and they can let you know. She can let you know.
Thank you. I'd also like to get a copy of the organic land management policy to review that. And after reviewing that, I would actually like to do a site visit to see what our OLM procedures are up there. So I just want to put that out there. The police e-bikes. I would like to, on the weekly report, have a report when the police gives their report on how many hours the police are using their e-bikes. I have not seen them. I've seen them twice. I saw them once in the Christmas parade and once, I believe it was Indigenous Peoples' Day. So I'd like to know if they're being used. And I have a long list, but I'll just shorten it to one thing, and that is composting. Statistics show that people will generally not save their composting and take it to a remote site, that generally speaking, but they will compost either at their home or in a neighborhood situation when someone has a composter on their property. And you know how we get grants for bear-proof trash cans. I'd like to throw out the idea of getting some bear-proof composting bins, the large ones that rotate, because I think that we could get a lot of composting happening in town if we made it easier for people to do that. And I'll leave it at that for now. I've got some other things, but I think we're going in the right direction.
Do you know if they have bear-proof compact? I know they have trash cans, but
Well, yeah, I've been,
know
we're
if
gonna purchase a couple composters for our property. There are bear-proof composters. They are, and some of them are very large. They are heavy-duty plastic. And there's a locking door, and they're the rotatable kind, so yes, but they're considered bear-proof composting bins, and you can get anywhere from a small to very large size of
thank you.
composters. That's it. Thank you.
Other comments from council? Denise?
I just want to mention that it is on our website and we posted this presentation or we posted the report last year on our website. And I handed it out to all of council. So you do have it from last year. It was a handout and it was posted on our website. So we try to update this every year.
Okay, thank you. Alex, I'd like to compliment you on this. I think this is a great piece of information. It's better than I would have expected. I think we've made progress here and there in bits and pieces, and it seems maybe if it seems a little haphazard, I think really it kind of reflects a culture of what we want to do and what we want to be. And if each department does what they can, and if each employee thinks about, how they can, save energy or conserve water or, protect the earth, it's a good example of the community. And I think the community ethic wants to embrace that as well. So I think the city's moving in the same direction and in lockstep with a lot of our citizens, and hopefully more of them will pick up and see that this is of great value. So what you've done tonight, I think, unifies a lot of the work that comes from different segments of the city and in fact the community.
Thank you.
Anything else, council? Okay, great. Thanks, Alex.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Okay, and our last item for the evening is an update on the Urban Renewal Authority discussion. This goes back, I think it was May 2nd. We had the discussion. It kind of bogged down over some questions. So I'd had the opportunity to meet with Becca, Denise, and Ann Nichols representing the URA, and we went over some of the numbers. That was August the 10th. So Becca, without further ado, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you. Yes, there we go. Next slide, please. So good evening. I'm Becca Davis, the Finance Director for the City of Manitou Springs. The URA was adopted by resolution on December 5th, 2006. Its method of financing is two types of tax increment financing, and they were established for a period not to exceed 25 years. The TIFs are from property tax and sales tax. Next slide, please. The property tax is based upon the entire mill levy in that area, and it's all the taxing entities, and it totals 77.181 mills. The sales tax TIF is based upon City Council's decision when the URA submits a financing plan outlining the proposed amounts and how the TIF is to be used. Next slide, please. Now, as I already mentioned, the entire mill levy is 77.181 mills, and of that amount, the city's portion is 12.988 mills. So what you see on the slide there is a breakout of the taxing entities, their mills, and the property tax generated by the mills for 2023. So the total for 2023 is 130,835. And as you can see, the city's share is $22,017. Next slide, please. So this brings us to City Council has three options for the URA's future. It's leave the URA as it is, keep the URA and create an IGA, intergovernmental agreement, or dissolve the URA. So the next few slides will provide the pros and cons of each option. Next slide, please. So option one is leave the URA as it is. Using 2023 as an example, the pros are that the city has an additional $108,818 being spent on the East End by the URA. And this includes an addition of 64.193 mils that the city would have spent on that area over the over the 12.988 mils. And another pro is the council can determine how much sales tax to allocate. So they currently aren't allocating anything. And there's no additional cost. So the cons are there's a lack of control by city council over development in the URA area in terms of the property tax. Next slide, please. So option 2 is to create an IGA with the URA. So the pros are all the same as option 1, with the addition of that language in this IGA can be crafted so that city council can help guide the area's development in the remaining years of these property and sales tax. And there are no cons. Next slide, please. And then finally, there's an option to dissolve the URA. Now, the pro would be that the city gets this $22,017 that's currently going towards development in that area. And that could be spent anywhere in the city or on operations. And I've forecasted tax revenues for the remaining period of the property tax, which is from 2023 to 2031. And of the property tax levy, if the URA remains in existence, there's about 2,113,962. And the city's share is 355,737 of that. And that would be retained by the city instead of being spent in that area. And once again, it could be used by anything. Yes, Julie.
Do you want questions at the end or as we go along? What would you prefer, Mayor?
Well, I guess, since Becca's doing the presentation, I'll ask you, Becca.
I can go ahead and entertain
But
questions as we
Perhaps
go
if we go
along.
along, as if we don't, I don't want to weigh this down too much, but
What's the 108,000? Where'd you get that number?
The 108,000.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I
So
thought the previous screen showed that 22 grand a year is the Manitou's share of property tax that currently goes to the URA. And that for all of 2023, the URA, if I understood it correctly, was
100.
looking at basically 131 grand
Yeah.
that they'll get from all sources for property taxes. And then all of a sudden on the screen before this one, you had 108,000, you had that same 108. Can we
Right.
go back a screen, please?
So if you take
Thanks.
130,000.
What does that sentence mean? City has an additional 100. Can you just explain that part?
Oh, well, if you take the 130,835, which is an entire area, and all the taxing entities, and you subtract out 22,017, that leaves you with 108,818. That's an additional money that would be retained by these other taxing entities that with the URA is being spent on that area. Now, if it's dissolved, that 108 goes away. But all of a sudden now the city can spend the 22,000 that is currently going to that area on anything in the city.
Excellent. Okay, thank you for explaining that for me.
Okay, so let's skip back over to option 3. So that's that 108 that would be retained now by the other taxing entities. And then the thing is that there's a state law that says the city could be required to fund the existing obligations of the URA. This would be something that we'd have to discuss with legal. But in my memo, I talk about that the largest financial obligation that is currently in existence over there is that the Holiday Inn is getting all of its property tax, the whole entire amount, the 77 point, what did we say that was? 77.181 being refunded. And the problem is right now, that's not that much money. That's the mill. That's the entire mill levy. And the city's portion is 12.988. So the problem is that right now, the property tax is pretty low on the Holiday Inn. And that's because its value, its market value is right now as of before the hotel was built. So once it's reassessed, the assumption is that the market value is going to go up to about 5 million. Now, of that, taxes are only paid on the assessed value, which is 28% of that market value. So the assessed value at that point would be $1.4 million. And that then makes that whole entire mills of 77.181. It means that it would be much higher. And excuse me. One page back. It means that looks like the taxes on it would go up from the current amount of 11,413 for 2023 to 104,572. And the city could be obligated to pay that whole entire amount. So we would end up in the hole pretty substantially after the year 31. If I put in in 2031 would be the final year. So if you look at the whole amount of time from, I use 2023 through 2031. If you look at that whole amount of time in terms of the property tax, using an escalation rate of 0.01% every year, that they could be reimbursed, be expected to be reimbursed, if you look at the whole entire amount, $945,897. And the amount that the city would have for this reimbursement is $164,726. So we would have to make up that difference of 781,171. Now, please remember, I'm talking about the whole entire amount. It's actually on a yearly basis. But when you aggregate all those years and look at everything that they would pay and expect to be reimbursed and what we would receive and still have to pay back, those are the aggregated total numbers. So that is a pretty big con. So.
Go ahead,
next-
John. Excuse me,
Yeah.
Becca, if you could entertain John's
So
question.
Becca, real quick. So I want to go over some things here in terms
Sure.
of taking your numbers, okay, of $1.7 million, okay, which is your inflation calculated number for 7 years, right? That's in your memo.
Okay,
1,758,225, right?
so what page is that? That must be page 61. 1,758,225. Yes, I found it.
Okay, so I guess I want to go over just for kind of council's edification in terms of, because you make a comment about how that money is suddenly appearing in the URA.
Just a minute, John, let me ask a question here. Becca, would it help for you to continue with your explanation? Then we come back to this because you may have some information that would have bearing on
Nope.
John's question. You want to?
It was just the final slide of recommending. Yeah, I have no other information to provide.
Okay, all right. So this is a good time to entertain that question, I guess.
Sure thing.
Okay, John, go ahead, please.
So that $1.7 million, okay, that you talk about kind of
Mhm.
coming into the URA, so to speak. Okay, I guess I wanted to kind of clarify and tell me if I'm wrong. Okay, but basically what's happening is all of those mill entities that you've outlined, okay, essentially all of that money is essentially being short circuited and going, is in theory available, okay, for distribution in the URA according to the property tax TIF. Okay. So what the bottom line is, just so that council knows this, is that over 7 years, okay, El Paso County government, okay, using your numbers and using the proportionality of the mill levy,
Mhm.
okay, is essentially losing out about 220,000, 212, well, I'm just going to round it up, $213,000 that El Paso County would normally be getting is coming into the URA's TIF.
Right.
Okay. So when we walk all the way through all these entities, okay, that's what El Paso County is losing. Okay. The Southeastern Colorado Water Conservation District is losing about 24,000. Okay. The Pikes Peak Library District is losing just shy of $100,000 worth of revenue. In other words, they're being asked to essentially donate those mills into the URA without they weren't asked. Okay. In other words, that's just happening. All right. Then a rather interesting thing is happening because the biggest lion's share, as we know, is District 14. Okay. So that's when I contacted the school finance office. Okay. And they said that basically the school district is being made whole except for about $45,000 a year. Okay. So basically the state, okay, we the taxpayers through the general fund, okay, is kicking in almost 1.5 million into the URA. Okay. Because essentially the school district is being made whole. So by the time you kind of figure out, you know, where the money's going, the school district's still getting their money minus 45,000 a year. Okay. But the URA is essentially getting all of their mill. Okay. Which would, in your inflation dollars, would be 1.4 million. Okay. So by my calculations, essentially the school district over the course of the next 7 years is short about $700,000. Okay. Because of the way, just the idiosyncrasies of the School Finance Act, that they don't get, they're not being made whole. And when I talked to the finance office, they said, nothing can be predicted with the School Finance Act over the next years. Okay. So if we just take your numbers and just broadcast them across 7 years and just say what's going on now, okay, is going to happen in the next 7 years. That's what the school district is basically losing. Okay, is about $700,000. So I wanted to kind of clarify because I didn't want council to think that this money just magically, okay, is just showing up out of thin air into the URA. It's all tied back to these mill rates. And the only entity that's essentially being anywhere close to being made whole is because of the School Finance Act and its interaction with the URA laws, okay, in terms of how the school district's not getting just totally screwed in this whole thing.
Sure. That's what I had on the slide for property taxing entities. I listed out the various entities and their proportions of the mill levy. So yes, they are losing those amounts of the mill levy. Now, they are receiving the property tax that was received up through 2006.
Right.
But after that, it is going to the east end, with
Right.
the idea that it's going to increase future taxing values
Right,
in that area.
right. Yeah,
So
that's
the
the
idea is
theory of the
long
URA
term,
law.
right?
Right,
The long term. That's the way, that's why they establish these things.
Right. So the other thing that I wanted to clarify is your numbers are based on the current mill
Mhm.
and then broadcasting it out the next 7 years, not looking back retrospectively in terms of what's already happened, because that's already water under the bridge.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. So, and now the last slide is I would recommend that city council directs staff to create an IGA with the ERA, mainly because of that very large con of the state law requiring the city to take on the the obligations of the URA that have been established. It looks like we would lose out over 700,000.
Yeah, and that was, that was the conclusion I think the four of us came to as we walked through this, and certainly most of the analysis was done by Becca, who's familiar with this, and Ann Nichols was helpful too. She has a great deal of experience in this. Yeah, I lean towards doing an IGA. I think clarifying some, the relationship between the URA and the city would be helpful. I do think it's position I'd like to take is to continue to withhold the sales tax. But if the URA came up with an opportunity, I mean, they could come in like any of our other boards. They could come in and tell us what they had in mind, and when we would see if it made sense. I think the perspective that the council has is that we need to take care of the entire city, and there's a huge number of needs we have. And I think right now, in my estimation, the URA is relatively stagnant. Certainly there's some things that can be done down there, but the owners would have to change and become more cooperative. You drive by, you can see 3 or 4 significant pieces of property that are just sitting there. And I don't think it's for the lack of the URA trying or the city. We've got landowners who are speculating or just not interested for whatever reason. Something could happen there. But in the meantime, there's a lot that needs to happen elsewhere in Manitou. I also think about if we could extend the URA up to, through the commercial district, there might be some benefits there to having it in the downtown. The West End now is looking, well, the road looks good, but there's some properties up there that look shabby. So I think, the city should give some attention to that. I could see where the URA might, if it were to expand and reach out, that would be a little bit different. Other councilors, do you have comments? John?
Yeah. So thank you, Becca, for that great presentation and kind of clarifying in terms of what's going on. To me, one of the things that I'm noticing kind of campaigning and whatnot is I keep getting these questions. Where is all the Manitou pot money gone? Okay. And of course, that's something that we all know on council here, that's a very difficult thing to kind of calculate. Okay. I was looking that in the state website in terms of how they're now reporting El Paso County retail sales. And we know that's why, is because the third store went online up in Palmer Lake. So that makes that magic number where you can now divulge, the amount of money. So there's only a certain set of months that we have since they went online. Otherwise, they have this little thing called NF, which says, we're not going to tell you what the amount is. Mm-hmm. So I was looking at the URA's board packet for this coming Friday, and notice that they have a balance of $875,000 and some dollars in their checking account. And this is sort of kind of the stomachache that I have. Is this large amount of money, okay, that's sitting in a Chase account earning 2 or 3% interest, okay? And I know that what's going to happen here in October is staff's going to come forward with a capital plan with all the needs. We know what they look like. We've already seen them. We know in previous years what we didn't fund and what we partially funded. And there's probably new things that are going to show up on there. So this bothers me that there's $875 in taxpayers' money that's sitting there. The second thing that I'm curious about, and I think the council needs to think about, and I'll pass these out. I believe the thing that is governing us right now is the urban renewal plan. Okay, section 6 that was agreed upon by council resolution back in 2006 and 7 in that time period about how we would get along financially, correct? I don't mean to, I'm just saying that rhetorically. You're shaking your heads.
John, you have to understand, she hasn't had the opportunity to know that. That this
Well,
is
no,
presented.
she refers to it in her memo. Okay. Yeah, so,
Section 6.3 tax increment
Exactly.
financing.
Right,
Yeah, I do have
exactly.
that section.
right, exactly. So what I'm curious about is in this, section of the urban renewal plan, okay, what is it that we want in the IGA that's different from this?
I assumed it was about the property tax because right now, city council has control over how the sales tax is spent. Because it says there that a financing plan outlining the proposed amounts and purpose for which the municipal sales tax increments are to be used. But right now, the URA doesn't come about the property tax aspect. So that's what I assume the IGA would be about. But that is a discussion for a different day.
So what I handed out to councils, I extracted out of the urban renewal plan 6.3 in case people didn't bring that as a result of reading your memo in terms of what was talked about in there. So that's why I kind of printed that out, only that section out for people to look at, because I think it's important that we try and figure out what the current arrangement is right now. Okay. And what is it that we would send, staff, spend a lot of attorney time on both sides, okay, pounding out what is it that we want in here. I want to get back to sort of kind of what I want, okay? I want the $875,000 back. There doesn't seem to be any reason, okay, in the URA plans. I've reviewed all of their meetings for the last year since that money's been in there. Okay. And I can see no purpose for it being sitting there. Okay. And that was money that this council transferred in, given this agreement of 6.3. And it seems like that money would be better used. Okay. And I think the mayor articulated that in his editorial to the community last August of 2022, that there's other needs in the community. And I think the URA's already made their statement. They spent $2.1 million with Paragon. Okay. And we await to see what fruit is being born there. And my ask is for that 875 to come back to the city so that we can begin working with that money in the city's capital plan.
Judith?
Thank you, Mayor. So I want to start with just making a public statement on some verbiage that was both in the memorandum and is on slide 6 of 9 in the packet on option 1, leave URA as is. And it states as a con, lack of control by city council over development in the URA area. I think a more accurate statement would be complete and total lack of control or input from any of our residents on multi-million-dollar development projects. So it's not about the council having lack of control. It's that we represent a community of residents who must have robust input on any of our developments, especially when we are giving, in my opinion, golden parachute sweetheart deals of $2.1 million when we have not been presented with any development plan. I too am campaigning for reelection, and I've had the questions people are asking me are also, where is the recreational marijuana money, given that this council voted last year to increase the sales tax to the maximum 10%. The second question I get is, what the heck's happening over at LaFun? And it's sad that my answer has to be, I have no idea. And, now that the Dillon is for sale, I don't know if you've driven by, but I do believe there's a sign up that says URA money. And so my concern is, again, a lack of the ability of the community to weigh in on these issues and feeling kept pretty much in the dark. The second thing I'd like to say is I too very much worry about the other capital expenses and needs of our town, which I think at last time we talked at budget season was in the realm of $12 million. So we can't remodel the pool and fitness center. We can't do all sorts of things that we need to do for the health, well-being, and safety of our town. Now, having said that, we've been presented with 3 potential options. I always think there's other options, but the 3 that are on the table are keep the URA as it is, which I oppose, and 3, get rid of it, which I would consider a last resort option. And I'm focusing on option 2, creating an IGA or MOU, although historically IGAs and MOUs, you can argue, whether they have sufficient teeth. But what I would like to see happen, since the URA will continue to get this property tax TIF of around $130,000, and we know that's going to be going up because property taxes are going up. We all feel that. And have enough money in their account for operating expenses and relinquish the balance of that to the general fund in a special line item that includes the sales tax TIF that we are withholding now. And then when the URA has a project that they want to fund, they can come to council and AKA by extension, the community, and, request funds. And so that's what I'm proposing that we consider this evening.
I'm not sure about the ramifications on the property tax. Right now, we don't even see it. It's distributed to them directly from El Paso County.
Now I'm proposing that continue to be the case at this point. If we don't dissolve the URA will continue to receive the sales tax TIF.
The property tax.
I'm sorry, this property tax TIF, property tax TIF, and that will continue. And right now the URA is obligated to finance the agreement they made with the Holiday Inn Express, and those funds can be used to make good on that deal that they made. So that is where I'm standing at this point this evening, and would appreciate further discussion on the topic.
Okay, thank you. John, did you have a comment?
Well, I guess I still want to go back to this, essentially, I think the elephant in the room, which is $876,000. Okay. We spend a lot of time as a council. Okay. I don't think there was anything that we allocated that was that amount. Okay. In the last 2 years in capital.
The library.
Yeah, exactly. Well, aggregate. When we add both years, right?
Right. It was 500,000 the first year and $1 million the second year.
Exactly right. So that's the only thing that comes close. Everything else, okay, there were dozens of other projects that could have been funded, okay, with 876. So it's sort of kind of my proposal that I think to kick these discussions off, I think for the city, I think it would be fair that maybe the URA would retain maybe 20,000 out of that. That can pay their overhead, their bank fees, their county fees for collecting the property tax and whatnot. But I would like to see the lion's share of that money come back to the city by October 1st, so that that can be put into our budget planning process with the capital. I do not think that money is earmarked for anything in the URA. I have heard no discussion in all the URA meetings that I have listened to, and members of the public can listen to them as well. They're all on YouTube. Okay. And I've heard no purposeful use for that amount of money, which is essentially money we have transferred in, okay, out of the city's general fund. And I think that money needs to come back.
Julie? Oh, so Natalie, okay, Natalie, and then Julie.
Okay, well, I just wanted to state that I'm in support of moving forward with the IGA. And I think that I'm excited about the idea that we could collaborate on a project like the Highway 24 interchange. I think that's a really dangerous spot. And I think that that's something where we can work together to improve that for particularly our residents that are trying to bike to the grocery store and places like that. And then I'm also holding out on that we will have a grocery store at the LaFun. I'm hoping that'll come through. And then I just also wanted to recognize that, Judith had mentioned there's no residential input. And of course, members of the URA are residents. And I just wanted to acknowledge that 3 of them are here today. So I just didn't want to say that there was no residential input, since they put a lot of time and energy into being on that board. So thanks.
Okay, thank you. Julie?
Thanks. Okay, so for starters, when I read this memo, and it helps that you clarified, Becca, and I just want to make sure I understand the clarification correctly, because this is not in the memo. The memo starts off on page 3, quoting a part of the urban renewal plan that just reminds us that we're not supposed to give them any city tax money, sales tax money, unless we approve their financial plan that they give us. And in the past, it's our own fault that, financial plans were maybe given and it said, oh, we'll use it for investment. And then the council said, okay, not us, but we already have the legal right, according to your memo, that we're not supposed to give them any sales tax money unless we approve their financial proposal. And then they have to use it the way we approved. They can't use it for something else. So that's fine. But then I read down at the bottom of page 3, I think it's page 3. I printed it out and it got kind of goofy. Page 60 of 74 in the packet. It says that let's do an IGA and let's have the IGA say that the city council from now on won't have to give them any sales tax money unless we approve of how they're going to use it. Well, that's already in the contract.
That's correct.
So there, I just want everyone to be clear, because there's nothing in here that says that under the key takeaways, you say recommend developing an IGA to better define the relationship. Okay, well, that's fluff. In particular, sales tax allocations released by the city will be approved in advance. That's already the law. That's already our contract. I mean, that's like saying I have a lease. It says I have to pay $600 a month. And then let's have a little new IGA that says I have to pay $600 a month. It's already in there. So that makes little sense to me on why you would have an IGA that just repeats a couple of the sentences from your contract that you already have. But then Becca's clarification just now is what does make sense. But I don't have any reason to believe that's what was discussed with Ann Nichols and the others. Today we find out, oh, I didn't really mean what I typed there. We already have the sales tax. We already have power over the sales tax and how we want them to use it, if any at all. But really the IGA you're suggesting will be to see if we can persuade them, if they're interested in making a deal, that rather than being shut down entirely, that maybe they'd be willing to let us decide not only what we already get to decide with the sales tax, but that we want to be able to control how they spend the property tax money that they get from us. The 130 grand a year or whatever it is. Do I understand that right? Because that's not, unless I missed it, that's not in here. But that's what you said today, and that's important to me. Is that what, that's what the IGA, is that what you discussed that day? Were you even there?
Julie, if I could maybe throw a bit of light on that.
Yeah.
You know, where it says here, the key takeaways, I'd have to go back and check my notes, but I think I'm the one that wrote that or wrote substantially that. I was just, we'd finished the,
This memo?
no, just
the
the
key
two, okay, where it says
takeaways.
the key takeaways, there's those 3 bullets.
Yeah,
And I think
you
I-
wrote that part?
something like that. But what the intent there was, it was after the meeting and I went home and I looked at my notes and I typed it up is just to, so I could remember what I thought was right. And I sent it to the 3 people who were part of that. And I said, this is what I remember. Is this what you remember? And they came back and said, yeah, that's a fair summation. Now, it wasn't my intent to try and come up with a complete solution there. I did think it was worth saying the sales taxes would be released, proven in advance. Well, yeah, as you say, we're doing that already.
Oh,
I
that's
put in-
already in the
Yeah,
contract.
so this isn't necessarily meant to be the solution. These are some comments I made. So, these are ink on paper. It wasn't
I
my
know,
intent
I
to
was
find
just
counsel. Yeah.
wondering. I
Yeah.
just was trying to figure out
Yeah.
if we're having staff spend all this time and this presentation and we're going to have an IGA and we're going to have meetings and the lawyers and legal fees. And then I read page 3 and I'm like, why are we doing this? And it says, so that we can decide if they're going to get sales tax money and if so, how they should use it. And I'm like, well, you already said that's in the contract. That's at the top of the
Well,
page.
yeah. And
Okay.
actually, and you and John kind of raised an interesting point. In our previous discussions and emails and all the direction that we got from Jeff Parker, I was under the impression that we couldn't address the property tax.
We can't,
But
and
we
that was
can-
something that was
Yeah.
discussed in private in executive session as our legal advice from our attorney said, we can't do that. And he said, and if you do it, it won't be enforceable. And I don't care if you call it an MOU or an IGA. MOU is a memorandum of understanding. It's sort of a pretend contract. And so he said it won't be enforceable anyway, and you can't do it. And I thought the message he gave us in private was that, hey, if you start messing with the URA contract that you now have, you can't, it's not like any other contract where you can make whatever mutually agreeable modifications you feel like making.
I have to object to
So,
executive
just a minute.
session things being discussed. in
Oh,
public.
okay.
Okay.
Well, then I'll stop. But yes, Mayor, to answer the question, I think you're correct that, okay, so where we are now is that we have a memo saying that the whole idea of this, IGA special contract between us and the URA, the whole idea is so that we can just repeat what's already in our contract, that we control the sales tax money. And then, but what you really meant to say was that the whole idea of the IGA, because we already have that as in our contract, is, oh, let's change the contract and let's be, Becca's telling us tonight, in control of the property tax. We've already been told we can't do that. Okay, by our attorney. So what are we talking about? I don't know why we're spending all this time reiterating. The most important part was we want to make sure we know how that sales tax money gets used, because that's over $1 million a year. We're not spending all this time fussing over 130,000 a year. It's the sales tax, but we already have control over that. So the real question is, what about the fact that they're sitting on almost $1 million with a sign on Manitou Avenue that says URA money? Really? Does our residents have already told us in the recent survey that the overwhelming majority of them feel that we're not spending money that are in the best interests of the residents and we're not allowing them sufficient input? And so I don't understand why I think we need to have a discussion about the fact that there's almost $1 million of sales tax money that belongs to the citizens of Manitou, and it's sitting in the URA account. And does that make sense to just leave it there so they can go ahead and give it away to the next developer? Just like they gave over $2 million to that private developer. For people who don't know, I mean, we all know because we've talked about it ad nauseum. But they gave over $2 million of our taxpayer money away so that some private guys could buy the LaFun property. And it was like, 33% off discount, or in that case, it was like 50% off discount. The whole property was sold for like 3 million. We paid for 2.2 of it, 2.1 or whatever. So I just want us to talk about the fact that there's almost $1 million in the URA bank account right now. And if they would like to stay in business and have a nice new relationship with us and find a new way of going forward, I think it's reasonable for us to take back that money, set it aside in the general fund, set it aside as a reserves that we can talk about at budget time on October 14th when we have our 8-hour meeting. And if they want to present what they want to spend that 800K on, they have some cool project, we should consider it as part of our budget meeting with all the other demands. But the URA, I mean, the IGA, all these letters, the IGA with the URA over sales tax, it's the emperor's new clothes. It's a fiction. It's make-believe. We already have that in our contract, and Becca admits that and says that right in the memo. So that's my problem with this, intergovernment agreement that says, let's just honor the contract we already have. Really? We want staff time on that? I don't see the point.
Okay. Well, Julie, those three bullets are not meant to be a solution. Those were some general thoughts. It
Well,
would
then
need,
are there other things, if there are other things that you all discussed that day that council should know that you
Yeah.
think should be in an IGA, I'd love to hear them.
well, I think, I guess the other part that I remember from that day, it's really on, I guess it's the top of the last page of the memo. And that was the point that Becca spoke to quite articulately a little while ago. And it talks about the Holiday Inn, the valuation, the numbers that we council had gone off considered previously were based on an early valuation when the hotel was still under construction. And now with a $5 million market value, it's a lot more tax. And to me, it looks like we've got a double-edged sword here.
Right, but if
Yeah.
we've already been informed by council, that's not an option, then why are you making us vote on it? I mean, we're not supposed to talk about confidential legal advice, and I won't go into details, but I will say, as you already said, that the city attorneys told us we have no legal right to modify the contractual agreement regarding the property tax. And so what else is there to discuss in a new agreement? That's what I haven't heard yet. I'm open to ideas.
Okay. Yeah, I guess, well, there's a couple things here, and this may seem a little disjointed, but I think to me, it was a game changer to see the potential obligation the city might be in if we were to dissolve the URA and then get stuck for the property tax.
Okay, I see that. I'm not talking about dissolving. I'm talking about why would there be an IGA? Why would there be a new contract? I'll call it that instead of IGA. Why would there be a new contract on something that
Well,
is either not legal, that our attorneys already told us, or that's something that's already in our contract? What else is there? What else are you going to put in there?
Nancy, why don't you weigh in?
Thank you. Several things. One is, it seems like the issue currently is whether we should do an IGA or just kind of leave things as they are, because Julie thinks that it doesn't really matter. Or what happens to the current balance in the URA's balance. First on that, I would say that at least part of that is property taxes, which we can't get back anyway. Or if we do, we lose everything.
We can't get any of it back. We've already been told that. We're not legally allowed to insist on that giving back to us. It's their money. We've gotten a legal memo on that point. The only question is if they feel like revising.
Well, that's my next point, if I could.
Let's,
Is
go ahead, Nancy.
that we approved their budget for the year. We did. They came before us last November and presented their goals. Crickets. Nobody said anything. Nobody criticized what they had plans. We can, talk all the time we want to about the LaFun property, but that's in the past now. And if we are now, if we have an IGA, I think the IGA is important, and I will tell you why. It is because it builds relationships. It more strictly outlines roles and responsibilities. And I think that council partnering with URA is what we have lacked all along. We've not given them guidance until fairly recently, even though they've complied with all the requirements that have been put on them. So I'm very disappointed in council, how we have dealt with this all along. I don't think it's been in a true partnering way. And I think Natalie's comment that these are our citizens, these are our residents, all but two of the URA members are residents of Manitou Springs. So I think that the IGA is the best option. I look forward to establishing a better relationship and a true partnership with them, because we have not done that, or to my knowledge. And I'll just leave it at that. But I think that that's why the IGA makes a great deal of sense. Thank you.
May I ask
Judith?
Mayor Pro Tem a question?
Yeah, go ahead, Judith.
In your mind, and you're bringing up some very valid points. In your mind, what would be the substance of your IGA?
I think how the funding is spent is an appropriate thing to partner with them on. I obviously, as I've been very clear about, I have much more faith and confidence and trust in the URA board than many other members of this council have. I did not disagree with the LaFun property deal. So I think that roles, relationships, how we do things in the future, I think if we build that foundation, which we just haven't had, if you don't give guidance to someone, you can't blame them after the fact when they do something that you don't like. And they are a state governed entity. They are not a city governed entity. So if we outline exactly what we expect and share it with them and have them participate in building the IGA, I think that that is a first step in creating a true partnership.
May I just make a
Yeah,
comment
go
that
ahead.
you approved the LaFun property because you had information. The rest of council didn't know about the LaFun deal until after the fact.
Actually, I
So,
didn't.
well, you said you support it, but I mean, I do believe that there's some relationship building that needs to be had on both sides. And I think part of that's transparency. And I'm not opposed to an IGA. I'm not opposed to that. I would rather see an IGA, even though it's questionable how many teeth it has, but you say you support it, but it's hard for me to look the residents in the eye. And yes, there are 5 residents on the board, but I'm not talking about 5 residents weighing in on a $2.1 million blank check at this point. And I'd love to see a grocery store too. And I'm grateful for the people that serve on the URA. What I'm talking about is robust community involvement on humongous development projects. And so when council didn't know, I didn't know until after the fact that deal had been struck. And I will also remind you that we additionally gave Paragon, they had to close by the August 23rd because they were going to have to pay capital gains tax on another property. So, I mean, we were just literally going, what can we do, for you? And so I think that I would love to see some relationship building. I think the URA should not be dissolved unless it's a last, absolute last ditch, thing. And I don't think that's going to happen. But I do feel that it's beholden on this council to be able to say to our citizens, the reason why we can't remodel the pool and the fitness center is because we don't have any money. The URA has $875,000, partly, old property taxes and sales tax, but we have to say no to that and other infrastructures. No, you can't have your road repaired now. So I don't want to be seen as the bad guy. I want to be seen as, can we do a win-win where the URA continues to operate. They have operating expenses. They return all of the funds if we can figure that out. And Becca, I'll leave that to you. What portion of the $875,000 is property tax and which would be sales tax if there is any. because there's got to be some sales tax in there because they only get $130,000 a year in property tax. So, you do the math. So, and I think that we can come to a very good agreement where the URA continues to exist. They have their operating expenses met. They return the sales tax portion of what's in their bank account. We put it in a special line item in the general fund, and they come to us and say, we want X amount of dollars. And we go, wow, these are really great initiatives. We're going to green light all of this, just like we do everybody else that comes to us for money. So that would be my proposal. So I'm not anti-URA and I'm not anti-IGA. That would be my recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Denise?
Mayor, I think there's been some great questions tonight. And what I'd like to do is I need to go and do some additional research, come back with some ideas that would be part of that IGA. I know that at one point Jeff Parker also mentioned an IGA. So let us reach out and see what that looks like. And then find out what we can do with the $800,000 that's in their account and do some analysis and then bring that back to council. I don't know if we can have this done by October 1st. I know Councilor Shada asked for those funds to be in the account by October 1st. We'll see what we can do, but if you can give us some time to go back and look at these are great questions, but we need to do some research.
Okay, thank you. John?
I guess I'm essentially just making an open appeal to the URA board for their meeting on Friday. And they can schedule an emergency meeting if they'd like to do this. But I'm making a public appeal for a vast majority of that $875,000 funds to be turned to the city's general fund. That is my ask. I think I have heard nothing here, okay, about other than people want apparently a document that says IGA on it. I don't know how it's different than what we have here. The other thing I want to clarify, and we keep hearing this stuff around the table, there is nothing in the Paragon agreement that says that there will be a grocery store there. In fact, this has been gone through by people on the board. And we have talked about it in our own meeting, that if Paragon comes back with an ice station at that 1 acre property, that is something that likely the Planning Commission would not even need to approve. It would meet all the setbacks, okay? So in other words, they could come back with an ice station that looks like what's over at 21st Street in Colorado, and they could plop that right in the middle of that property there, okay? And that would be approved administratively by our planning department within just hours, okay? All right? They have all the parking they would need, okay? All the setbacks are there. It's zoned commercial, okay? So I want to go over this whole thing that keeps coming up, that people dangle, that somehow or another, there's going to be a grocery store here, okay? There's nothing in the Paragon agreement, nothing, okay, that says that there will be a grocery store there. Okay, it can be any legitimate commercial use. All right. So I want to iron that out to the community. All right. That's not something that Paragon is beholden to vis-a-vis their agreement with the URA. Okay. They are allowed to bring back a commercial proposal for review. That's it. Okay. Not for approval, for review. The URA board could look at that and go, we don't want a little ice station there. And the developer could march right down here to City Hall, put that ice station in there and say, there's a little kiosk in the middle. Colorado Springs Utilities would be out to connect the electrical up, okay? And an ice station probably doesn't even need to have even any sewage or anything like that. They could do something so mundane like that and sit on this property, okay, for as long as they want, sell it to whoever they want. So I want to iron out that this whole thing that people are somehow dangling as some bizarre thing, that there's going to be a grocery store there. It's not in any documents. It's not there. If somebody else can point that out to me, please show me that I'm wrong. I'll be glad to be corrected. Thank you.
Thank you. Nancy?
As long as we're trying to educate the community, I would say that because of the URA's work, the LaFun is gone and hence crime has gone down in that area. And God knows when that might have happened otherwise. I would say that they're working very hard with the Paragon to get a grocery store. They may not succeed because you're correct, it is not required, but they are working very hard to get a grocery store. And they will work very hard to ensure, and again, they can't promise this, but to ensure that whatever development goes in there will be in accordance with the values of Manitou Springs residents. So, to demonize the URA for that, we have to look at both sides of that because they've done a lot of good as well. And oh, by the way, their main function is to reduce blight, which they have done, and to increase the economic vitality of the area, which we already know that the Holiday Inn Express, it is my understanding, is exceeding expectations in terms of sales tax return. And as soon as there is, and I am very optimistic that there will be development on the LaFun property, that will increase our sales tax and property tax revenues as well. So there are a lot of good. We have to look at both sides of this, not just the negative sides. Thank you.
Judith?
Mayor Pro Tem, you used the word demonize. And what I want to just say is there is nobody sitting here on council that is anti-URA. There's no one, and I can speak for you all, that's anti-development. We are pro the right kind of development. We are pro having robust input on the decisions that are made, these huge decisions. And the URA has done a phenomenal job on a number of projects. I'm not disputing that at all. I'm not disputing any board, committee, or commission members that volunteers their time to do the hard work. So, and I hear this, and it's really unfortunate. What we council members, though, what our job is to be the voice of the people who elect us into office, right? We work for you. We're your employee. So there's going to, sometimes be issues related to a particular development project or something that, the city staff, and it's a balancing act. But, to me, while I don't think there's going to be an ice station there, I don't know. And of course, Paragon has been given 6 to 8 years, depending on how much money they want to fork over to make that happen. And so I think that's a high price to pay to get rid, to decrease crime and blight just on that one property, $2.1 million. Is the lot growing grass better than, the LaFun property being there? I'll go ahead and say yes, but I look at that lot and go, man, we could be growing a community garden for our neighborhood. We could be doing things with some collaboration with these people if we had some community input. So I just want to stop that conversation too about, council members demonizing or wanting to take the URA's money back. We just said, we would love to fund your projects, and we would love to fund your projects just like we fund all of the other projects that come to council for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Julie?
Yeah, I just want to, I agree with that and I appreciate that. And I think, democracy is difficult and it's sloppy and it's frustrating sometimes, and we all are required to say our point of view. But I don't think we need to be calling each other names or accusing each other of demonizing. I don't feel like I'm demonizing anybody. I too appreciate the work that the URA has done. Some of it I agree with, some of it I think is horrendous, but that doesn't mean I'm demonizing them. If I'm saying that I too am campaigning, anybody has to go around town and you don't have to be campaigning. You just ask people, hey, do you have any questions about how the city is run? It really is a very common question that people say, yeah, where's all the marijuana money going? Our streets have potholes and we've been complaining about it for years and nothing ever happens. And what the heck? So when we're suggesting that this money sitting in the URA account would be better served to sit in our account and that we can evaluate their proposals, just like all the other $12 million of projects that we've been told need to be done, the pool and all the other things. That means we're being responsible to look at the whole picture and all of the financial demands on us and figure out what is the best. And I'd love to invite the residents to come in and tell us, what do they think on budget day? Or what do they think about this or that proposal? Do they want to spend, do they want the URA to give them, that practically $1 million they're sitting on to someone to buy the Dillon Hotel? Or do they want us to put it in the general fund so we can evaluate all the projects? But that doesn't mean we're demonizing anyone or that we're bad people or we're anti-development or we hate developers or any of that stuff that I hear. It's very unnecessary. I also want to clarify that the city council closed down the LaFun business because they were unable to control the crime in their business. And that's what shut the hotel down, or the motel, I guess it was. And that's when the crime stopped. It's not because I don't want the public to think, wow, well, maybe that $2 million that we gave the developer was worthwhile because maybe $500,000 of it was spent to prevent crime. No, that was I think the crime pretty much ended when we shut the hotel down. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you. Julie, you made kind of an interesting remark there. In some ways, I think by the URAs helping Paragon to buy that property, in a sense, it rewarded a speculator in my mind. I think it helped the previous owner, the one who owned it when we had all the problems, all the legal problems and crime problems and so forth. I mean, she was asking for, I think, a profit of $1 million. Remember right, she paid something like 1.8 and she was asking 2.8. I think she got somewhere more like 2.65 million. And to me, that's kind of government backfired in my mind. We basically took a speculator and we rewarded them. And when I say we, it was, going through this mechanism of the URA. So I really kind of have second thoughts about the efficacy of URAs. I know that in other cities, they're supposed to work. I think in some ways it's worked well here, but it also can backfire. There's a lot of details. I mean, every time we ask Jeff Parker for advice, it seems like there's another twist because the URA law is so complicated. I do think that moving to an IGA would give us an opportunity to clarify our relationship. At the risk of being redundant, we would specify that they wouldn't get the sales tax unless we could agree on something.
That's already the law, sir.
I know it is, but I mean, I would reiterate it. I mean, just because we know it. I mean, if we're going to have a formal agreement, we would specify that. I
Can
don't know.
ask you something though?
Well,
May I?
just a minute. Let me finish too. I don't know regarding the 875,000 or whatever that's in the bank account. The direction that I got from Jeff Parker was that's the URA money. I don't know that there's a way to get that back. John can ask for it, but
We can only
that's a
get it
couple
back
months.
if they want to give it to us.
Okay, that would be my
Yeah.
understanding.
And so for that reason, though, I mean, I don't mind if there's an IGA. It sounds more like, it would be the summary of like a group therapy session. We're going to work on our relationship, But if I don't feel comfortable with the final recommendation here of saying, well, let staff go work it out, because there's nothing to work out other than touchy-feely, legally unenforceable stuff that I've heard today. Plus reiterating portions of the old contract, just repeating them again, which is fine. I don't care. That's silly, but I don't care. But I don't want any IGA signed by anyone unless we know exactly what it says and we have a chance to weigh in on it as a council, as opposed to the recommendation in here. If we just say, okay, well, go work something out, especially since we don't know what the something is other than let's get along better. So that would be my only ask, is that there's nothing signed on this matter until council has a chance to find out what's being proposed, like Denise said that she would do, and
No.
bring it back to us, and then we can discuss.
No, I think she made, Denise made good comments saying there's more questions here that need to be answered. And then this is a work session. We're not going to decide anything really tonight. So but it's kind of a question, do we want to give direction? So I guess really the nut to break here is we want to let Denise take the question, take it back to Jeff Parker and see if Jeff could come up with a draft of an IGA that would, and then
I think that's
council
a
would
waste of
review it and we
money.
could hammer it out. I'm
I
sorry.
think that's a waste of money. I would respectfully propose that we have some answers to our questions, some of which are legal questions, so they may have to be an executive session. We find out what the heck is going to be in, what are you recommending be in this agreement? Let's get along better. I'll sign that. Okay, that's fine. But if there's, you could still be in charge of deciding if we get any sales tax, and if so, how it's going to be used. And you can still do that because it's already in our contract. I don't mind that either. But I want to see that's a legally binding contract that is going to have an effect on potentially millions of dollars. So I don't want any staff to be negotiating. I don't even want to see a draft. Why should we pay thousands of dollars for a draft of an IGA? Let's find out first the bullet points. What the heck is it supposed to say? Just give me 4 things other than let's improve our partnership and let's like each other more. Great, whatever. But anything beyond that, I want to see what it is before we pay the attorney to draft it up. That's just my personal opinion.
May I make a comment?
Yes. Okay, Judith.
I thank you for indulging me. I've taken up a lot of airspace tonight, but I just want to, and this question is to you, Mayor. We do have some members from the URA that are here that have taken the time out of their busy schedules to come, and I just going to suggest that if you feel that they have some input that would be important for us, and then I would say, yes, I do believe that we need more information, but I would like to ask if you're thinking that would be appropriate.
I think that's a good point. Yeah, I don't want to belabor this too much tonight. I mean, I guess it's not really urgent that we do this. We did kind of want to get it, I think, moving along, or we left it back in May undone. But no. Debbie, John, do you have comments you'd like to share tonight? You don't? Okay. Ann, I'm sorry, Ann, I think you're back. I can't see it from here. No comments. Okay. All right. Well, council, let's kind of just get a flavor of what we want to do. Maybe we don't want to do anything. I guess, we really aren't required to do anything. It's probably the relationship with the URA could be better. It could be worse. Denise has offered to do some research and get some answers, and I think that would probably fall to Jeff Parker in large measure. We just table the whole thing. I guess one of the questions that comes to my mind is, okay, we dodged a bullet on the marijuana vote in Colorado Springs. I don't think that's going to last forever. We need to think about our economy and how we're going to do stuff. I want us to be in a position where we can spend our money as wisely as possible. That means taking care of things like infrastructure and facilities, but also in reinvesting in our economic development. That's what a URA is, I think, essentially supposed to do. But I think the whole town should benefit from this. And if we want to talk about commercial areas, the West End needs work. The downtown could use work. In my mind, whoever has the best project in the area, maybe should get the money, or at least we should be able to consider that. In the present circumstances we have with the URA is that we're confined to that one small piece of Manitou. So that's my thought. I guess if we just go around the room here and we'll just each briefly say what we want to accomplish tonight. Michelle, please.
I'm for Denise getting some answers to the questions that we have asked tonight.
Thank you. Judith?
I concur with Councillor Weatherholt. I'm okay with the city administrator coming back. I'm just wondering if this can be done at any time before budget retreat.
We've got a lot of things on our plate. I mean, we're trying to do the library, et cetera, et cetera. So, Denise, okay, so she's nodding. Okay, Nancy?
Yeah, I'm for an IGA and I'm against taking any of the 845K. I think we have the general fund that we don't invest in the east side, but we do invest it in other parts of the city. So I think that the URA was designed to help with economic development. And for a good reason, because that's the most likely place where we can get economic development at this point. And they're in the best position to accomplish that. And if we talk about revenue, if we don't get some more sources of revenue, I totally agree that we cannot depend on marijuana money forever. So I would like to see good managed development in the east side in the URA district. And I think they're in the best position to help do that. So thank you.
Thanks, Nancy. John?
I think I'm just going to repeat my request again. I believe that a significant portion of the $76,000 ought to be returned to the city by October 1st. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, John. Natalie?
I'm comfortable with Denise coming back to us with additional information.
Okay, thank you. Julie?
So I agree with John about the money being returned to the city. I realize that would just have to be done voluntarily. It's my understanding there's no legal way we can force that, so that's fine. I would like us to move quickly on this because if I find out that a good portion of that $876,000 has been spent to pay a private developer to buy the Dillon Hotel, I'll be really disappointed. And I think our residents would be too. I have no objection to there being an IGA. I would like to see what the heck the terms would be other than let's be nice and let's get along. If it says that, I have no objection. I'd like to know from our city attorney through a private email for him to confirm, if I remember correctly, that we are not allowed to change anything in an IGA or an MOU regarding their URA's use of property tax, because if that's a no, then there's no reason to pursue that any further. So I'd like more information on what would be in the IGA besides let's be nice and get along. And besides what's already in our contract with the URA. And then I'd like the legal advice. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. And I would also support going in the direction of an IGA and getting some additional information. So would support that. I think that's the majority of council here. So Denise, we would ask you to, I guess you'll definitely need to involve Jeff Parker. So thank you. Okay, anything else on that tonight? Great. Becca, thanks a lot. I know that's really it's a challenging subject to work through, URA law and finances and stuff. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And also thank you, Denise. You did a lot of work in support of this. And also, Ann, I'd like to, having your perspective was helpful. So thank you. Okay, I think that gets us through most of tonight's meeting. We're to council correspondence. Does anybody have anything? It's been a quiet late night, quiet week in Lake Wobegon, as they would say. I guess so. Nancy, did you have something that you? No, you didn't. Okay. All right. Well, Pikes Peak Marathon's this weekend. The Ascent on Saturday, Sunday, the marathon. It snowed today, so that should make it interesting. It's always a big event for me. And that is the oldest continuous marathon in the United States now, because Boston during COVID, they skipped a year or two. And so Manitou Springs, home of the oldest continuous marathon in the United States. That's us. Because
We did the marathon during COVID. Is that
Right.
why we outdid them?
Yeah, we did. And they did a whole bunch of extra protocol to keep people from getting too close.
Oh,
But I think that was kind of neat. It says something about the culture of the Pikes Peak Marathon. See, I think that's all I've got. Anybody else? No? Okay, city managers or city administrators report, Roy?
Just to let you know that the striping on Ruxton is postponed a week because of the rain this week. So we're going to do Crystal Park Road next week and then Ruxton the following week, weather permitting. That's all I got.
Sounds good. Denise? Nothing? Okay. This being a work session, we don't need a motion to adjourn. We can just call it a night. Thanks, everybody.